Hello, everyone. This is Dave Paulsen, head men's basketball coach at George Mason with episode 7 of DP's Distancing Dialogues. Thrilled to have Aaron Kelly, my longtime assistant, and just finished up his first year head coach at Catholic University with us. AK, welcome aboard.
I appreciate you having me. It's fun to be back.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Coach Kelly was with me for 1 year at Williams College, 7 years at Bucknell, 4 years at George Mason, so 12 consecutive years, which is a longer sentence than anyone should have to endure. And then last year was hired at his alma mater, Catholic University, great fit for both for Catholic and for AK. Just as a review for those just tuning in, these are discussions that I normally would have in person with the different guys who've been assistants with me. We're on the phone and try to do this through the Zoom platform, but also try to give back in some way as we're really going through unprecedented times in this country. So I've done a couple of different charities and groups that I've tried to give to. And this week I'm going to give to Coaches Coalition for Progress, which is a new group of coaches coming together to try to fight racial inequality and provide opportunities and education and just combat just some of the problems that, have certainly taken center stage in this country. And AK, you got a group that you're going to give to?
Yeah, Boys and Girls Club of Washington, D.C.
Okay, awesome. So, again, anyone who watches this, hopefully you pick up one thing of value or one thing to think about, share the game. But then we just ask if you saw anything of value, just consider making a donation to somebody, to some organization. Give back of your time, your money, host somebody, just do something to try to just move things forward. So we'll get started and just talking about some basketball concepts, and then in a little bit, AK will share a screen. But so the big question, I think, for a lot of people is, what was the biggest adjustment going from being an assistant to a head coach? What was harder than you thought? What was maybe less difficult?
The biggest adjustment for me, without a doubt, was the 360-degree thinking you have to do as a head coach. One of the things I really liked about being an assistant is you could kind of immerse yourself in whatever it was you were doing that day or that week. So there would be times working for you where I might have, 2 scouts to do in a week, and I could not worry about practice. I could not worry about recruiting, and I would just focus on my scouts. And that's what I would do that week. Be another week where I didn't have any scouts and I would want to go recruiting. And for 2 or 3 days, I would shut everything else out and I would just focus on recruiting. And selfishly, I loved it. It was kind of a good way to just hone in on one thing. As a head coach, you don't have the luxury of doing that, So like you go recruiting, you still have to plan practice for tomorrow. So I think for me, that was the biggest adjustment is when I'm doing one thing, you still need to be thinking about 3 or 4 other things. So yeah, that was the biggest adjustment.
It's overwhelming sometimes, isn't it?
At the beginning it was, because I wouldn't think about it. I would go recruiting and I would tune out. And then after, 3 or 4 times of doing that, I realized when you're recruiting, you still have to be thinking about the guys back on campus. You still have to be thinking about planning practice. And then I kind of got into a rhythm, probably like halfway into the year. And now I'm just conditioned to do it. But that was, and I'm glad, I've learned a ton over the course of the last year. But that was probably the thing that I've learned the most from, it's been most beneficial for me.
What have you done? Has there been like a way in which you've broken up your day? Has there been an organizing system? What has made that easier for you?
Well, I tell you what makes it harder is having kids.
Yes.
And to be honest with you, I haven't been able to break up my day to get into a routine as much as I would like to because of kind of what our family dynamic is right now. But for me, I think it was just more of like flipping a switch in my mind, and it was a mindset. And once I programmed my mind to think like a head coach, everything became easier for me.
Yeah, that's good. That's interesting. What was something maybe you were worried about that didn't end up being that much of a difference being, going to become the head coach?
I would say probably like the practice planning, and kind of being able to, think ahead, 2 or 3 weeks down the road. I made mistakes doing it. Like I've learned things over this year that I would go back and redo, and which I'll do next year. But walking into practice, I always felt really prepared. I always knew what I wanted to work on, and I knew kind of a week in advance, like what we were going to want to work on. And again, being an assistant, that was something I never had to do. I didn't know if I'd be able to do it, but I thought I thought it was organized in our approach. Now, my decision-making wasn't always right in hindsight, but I thought my approach to that was pretty good.
Right. And then you can go back and correct
exactly
whatever decision or how we taught this or when we installed it, but there's a organizing system in your head as how you're going to progress with practice, which is great. How, what's it like to be back at your alma mater?
It's a lot of fun. It's, like you and I talked a lot, over the last decade about, when to take a job, what job to try to get. Some of the advice that you had given me that I think really resonated was like, you don't want to take a bad one. Don't go take a job just because you feel like you're ready to be a head coach. Take a job that you feel like you could spend the next 20 or 30 years coaching at. And it's a product that you believe in, so that when you talk to recruits and you talk to families, you feel good about the place that you're selling. And having gone to Catholic U and knowing what the experience is, I really liked it. And every time I talk to a family, I feel good about selling our product to them. And, it's a place that I would love to be, for the next 20 or 30 years. And I think if I'm able to do that, like I'll feel really satisfied, so I'm not looking for another opportunity. Like I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And having the experience as a player and as a student reassured me. When the job opened, I knew I wanted it,
Right.
because I had gone through it before.
Now, any professors that were there when you were maybe not always doing what you're supposed to do academically that are like kind of haunt you?
There's one. And he was like my only A.
Only A?
Because he was a good guy. And he's still a good guy. Thank God.
But there's not that many professors left from.
No, and we're a little bit removed, kind of where we are on campus. We're a little bit removed from the academic side of things.
Okay.
So we don't interact as much with the professors, but the place has changed quite a bit since I've gone, and even in the athletic department, like there's a few faces left over, but it'd been, 13, 14 or whatever it was, 15 years. A lot of new faces, but there are still a few who might remember some of my not so mature days.
Yeah. That's all good. What's the big, for those, maybe for Mason fans who are tuning in to want to see, like, what's the biggest difference in recruiting at the Division III level from recruiting at the Division I level?
Yeah, I think I think this goes for every level. I think the difference is the size of the athlete. The skill set is not that much different. The games are pretty similar in terms of the concepts and what skills translate. I think what makes the difference between a high major Division I player and a low major Division I player and a Division III player is size, speed, athleticism. And, our kids are going to be a step slower and a step smaller, than the kids that end up getting Division I scholarships. They're not necessarily any worse basketball players. They just don't have the physical tools.
Right. But the dynamics, so 100%, the dynamics of recruiting at the Division III level, for some people may not know,
Yeah.
everything in Division III is based on need.
Yep.
So there's no full scholarships.
Yep.
How does that impact, the mechanics of you formulating a recruiting class?
You have to recruit more kids, and you have to be a little bit more patient with your recruiting. You also have to be okay with recruiting a kid really actively, that kid wanting to come to your school, him telling you that he wants to come. And at the end of the day, the finances don't work and he can't come. And you have to understand that, and what I loved about Division I recruiting is the scholarship was the great equalizer. So like you knew if you wanted a kid and that kid wanted your school, there were no barriers to making that work. And that's the only thing about the Division III recruiting that I don't love is, we'll fall in love with a kid, he'll fall in love with our school, and finances come back, and it's just not something that's feasible for the family to do.
Yeah. And that's not going to get any easier probably as we come out of this situation.
It doesn't look like it.
No. Have you guys had any, is there a plan for the fall in any way?
Yeah, I mean, they are, as of right now, they plan on being back in the fall and having a traditional semester. There's things that are going to be in place that are going to be different. Some aspects of online learning, some in-person learning. It's not going to be completely what it was a year ago. But right now they're planning on having kids back and giving them as good of an experience as they can.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, I think if there's any way, if anything came out of all this, maybe a little greater appreciation for the in-person educational aspect and how much learning goes on just with person-to-person interaction.
There's no doubt about it. And I think the other thing it gave us, all of our players and coaches, an appreciation for is the season. I've had so many of our guys ask me, like, are we going to have a season? Are we going to have a season? And even for you and I, who, we've coached for as long as we've never thought about not having a season. We've always kind of taken that for granted. And this is kind of a good dose of perspective for us. If and when we do have a season, like how lucky we are to have one.
Yeah. I know for me, I won't take for granted ever again, just the ability to go into my office, go into the gym with the guys and, and I think hopefully for players as well. Sometimes I don't feel like practicing today.
I'm tired,
right? Like now they've had 3 full months of not playing basketball. And I would guess most of our guys on our 2 teams have never gone more than 3 weeks without playing basketball. So yeah, 100%. How about the last thing before we kind of get into the screen sharing? What have you noticed in terms of the difference? So part of it is not only the size of the athletes, but also the access, right? So in Division I, we're allowed to work with our guys out of season so much more. How did you find that adjustment? And talk a little bit about just the limitations.
That was hard. That was really hard. So the biggest mistake I think that I made in year 1 is we started practice October 15th and we had an exhibition against you guys October 30th, right? So it was like 14 or 15 days. And I think we had like 12 practices before we had to be ready for that exhibition. So we needed an offense, a defense, out of bounds plays, press break in 12 days of practice. And what I did is I shortchanged the process, like the building blocks. And instead of like teaching our guys how to play offense, I was teaching them our plays because I felt like it was necessary for us to be able to play a game, to have some stuff we could run. So, there's 4 or 5 different ball screen sets that we have in for our first game, but I haven't taught these guys how to come off a ball screen.
Right. So, how to read things.
Yeah. So like we hadn't played against hard hedges. We hadn't played against a soft hedge. I hadn't taught them, adjusting on penetration or what do we do when we throw the ball into the post. So in Division I, like we have the summer and all of the fall to do that. So when we start practice, we'll start teaching our offense. And what I'll do next year is come October 15th, I will do that stuff. Like we'll break down in a lot of 1-on-1 and 2-on-2 and 3-on-3 stuff and break down how to play offense without any plays. And then as we get into our season, we'll build out from there. We'll add some layers to it. And I didn't do that. And I actually ended up doing it. I realized, kind of midstream, like we just don't know how to play offense. So we're turning the ball over 20 times a game and we can have all these different plays and none of them matter. So mid-season, we actually started doing it. We kind of scrapped the offense. We went back to just working on really basic fundamental offensive skills. And we got better. Like we played a lot simpler, but we turned the ball over less. We were definitely like a little bit more of a sound basketball team. Now we didn't get advanced, so we had a ceiling, but if we start doing that in October next year, as opposed to January, we're going to be a lot better off for it.
I think that's always a challenge. I think, remember our meetings, I would be the other way. I would want to spend more time on the fundamentals, even with the summer work we get in the fall work. And there, at times we didn't probably put enough plays in. We didn't probably do enough. So finding that balance that works for you and how you want to coach and for your school and your guys and your team. And the other thing that I found is no two seasons are the same. So you might be able to get more advanced earlier with one team. You may not the next year,
that was the other big difference was I didn't know my kids.
Right.
I just didn't know what their skill set was. We had a roster that was kind of fluid at the beginning of the year. So you think you've got one team and then come, November 1st, you're dealing with a whole different group of guys. And that's the other big takeaway is like, find out who your good players are, play through them because they're going to be better than whatever offense you think you can install.
No question. All right, well, let's get to the what lies near and dear to your heart, defense.
Yep.
So you're going to talk a little bit about ball screen defense and barrier screen, and we'll see how much is similar to what we did together and how much has changed.
I think you'll find most of it pretty similar, maybe some slight differences. Can you see my screen all right?
Yep.
Okay.
I think you might have to go down and turn your volume down, though. It's when you go full down, I think.
Say it again.
I think you probably got to turn your volume down
on
the audio.
Okay. So I got to turn it down on Synergy, correct?
Yeah. I think.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Okay. So you got
now
that.
You can go. Yeah. Now you can go full screen.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. So first of all, I'll kind of talk through. We hard hedged every ball screen. Like we only played one defense. We were 100% half court man to man. We hard hedged every ball screen. So as we
with the 4 and the 5.
No, with our 5.
Okay.
With our 5, we would switch 1 through 4. But with our 5, it was a hard hedge everything. Some of the pros to this, and you'll see it as we go through the film. I think it's the best way to keep the ball out of the paint. It's the best way to guard a dynamic guard. I think it ends up providing clarity for all 5 guys on the floor because all 5 guys need to be engaged in the ball screen. And it establishes for us, who was like a half-court man-to-man team, a very aggressive mindset. The cons, I think it's predictable, and teams will eventually scheme against it. It's harder to execute in transition, unsettled situations, and I don't think it's very good for bigs who aren't mobile or who are foul prone. All right, and you'll see why here. So I'm going to let this play, and I think it's important to note here, like this initial ball screen, a lot of teams would run kind of a fluff initial ball screen. We didn't really execute ball screen D against it. We would go game by game on an initial screen that we didn't think was a threat. We would either just switch it or we would tell our guard to run under it, get through it. So this one right here was just kind of a game by game navigation. But then once teams started to get into their ball screen stuff, all right, this is what we would tell our guys to do. And what I'll use is, Coach, do you see my cursor here?
Yep.
Okay. So the guy guarding the ball, two things he has to do. He has to not allow or refuse, and he has to crawl up and kind of get into this kid's space. All right. So our 5-man, we always wanted him to arrive attached to the offensive 5. And then we told our 5, we want you to get out and impact the ball as best you can and just redirect it to the best of your ability. So we weren't so caught up on like always sending the ball to half court or always sending it to the sideline. I just wanted the ball handler to have to retreat and feel pressure from our big. And once our big felt like he did that, then he could get back to guarding his guy. So 5's got to impact the ball. And then the 3 guys off of the ball, the lowest guy on the heavy side is our hoop guy. So as soon as the ball screen starts to happen, the lowest guy is going to get to the hoop. And this kid right here is in perfect position. It's exactly where we want him to be. And he's yelling hoop, hoop, hoop. He identifies that he's got the hoop. He'll absorb any roll to the basket from the 5. And then our other 2 guys, this guy here and this guy here, are both our zone guys. They have similar responsibilities, but we would always say that there's one zone guy who can be more of a man guy. And in this case, it's this kid right here. So this kid knows, like, I'm playing my zone, but I'm really only responsible for 12 here. And then this bottom zone guy is truly zoned up between these 2 guys.
Right.
All right. So for every ball screen that happened, we had 2 guys committed to the ball. We had 1 guy who was the hoop guy, and then we had 2 guys who were zoned up. So here, our 5-man does a really good job redirecting. Our other guys are engaged, and that's exactly the shot we want the other team to take. All right, so now that I've kind of explained what we do, I'll just let you watch it, see what it looks like.
So, yeah, run that back just a little bit. So yours is more to like what we would usually call a black, right? This case. So then would you guys have issues with the 5-man and the guy on the ball?
All the time.
All the time. Or guards splitting on the comeback or
not as much the guard splitting on the comeback, but like our 2 guys, like right here, that was probably like as smooth of a navigation.
Yeah, that was great.
For. But oftentimes they would get tangled up a little bit. And I would always tell our guards, like, throw the big out of the way. You know, like, just find a way to navigate our big. You can wrap your arms around him, throw him out of the way. Like, it's important for you to get your nose back on the ball. So we didn't have a set principle with that. It was more just kind of get it done, whatever way is going to be fastest.
Yeah. If possession was like that, things would be easy.
Without a doubt. So this one, you'll see the same type of thing. It's like a little bit of a different formation that they get to. So right here, the ball screen's happening. The low guy, our hoop guy, is right here. He's in perfect position. He's going to yell out hoop. We got our top zone guy right here, going to be responsible for this guy right here. And then our bottom zone guy right here is splitting this guy on the block and then this guy in the corner. All right. And then again, our big, that's perfect. Like, his hands are back. He's not fouling, and he has redirected this kid. So as soon as this kid takes that retreat step, he's back. He's out of the play. And again, like, those are the shots we want teams taking. Like, the ball stays out of the paint. We've got 5 guys who are like totally engaged in the play. That's one we'll live with. All right, here you'll see what I said earlier is teams will try to scheme for this ball screen D because they always know you're going to hard hedge. All right, Moravian is a team in our league. We play twice a year. They did a really good job scheming against our hard hedge. So what they're doing here is they know right now our 5-man's going to get out and hard hedge this. So they're throwing an early pass to this kid 20 at the top of the key. And he's looking to hit that big on a dive. But our hoop kid is in perfect position, right? But he's like right there on the charge circle, splitting the rim. It's exactly where we want him to be. So he takes away that pass. We recover. We get back to set. They're going to get to a second ball screen here. All right. Now, our hoop guy again. Hoop guy's here. We got our zone guy splitting these two guys here. We have our top zone guy, but he knows he's really just guarding this kid. All right. And then what our hoop guy does a good job of here is not overcommitting to this pick and pop to 15 feet. Because we would always tell our 5, no matter what, after you hedge the ball screen, you're always going to recover to your guy. So our 5 is always going back to our 5. And what this kid did is he made a good read because he knew this big wasn't a pick and pop threat. He also knew our 5 was going to recover. So he didn't commit to him. He just kind of stunts at him. Kid shoots a contested 15-foot jump shot. It's another one that we want to live with. So you see it again here kind of all the way through. Good hoop presence. Now we're back to set. Second ball screen happens. Good hoop presence again. Contested jump shot. Ball never gets in the paint. All right, last one I'll show you. So this one here, the other thing that we gave our kids some freedom to do is we would tell our 5, oh, sorry, here. Run this back. Okay, so this one, what we would tell our guys is good teams can go from scrambled to set. And like that was always our goal. So like if you're going to commit 2 to the ball, you're going to end up in 4-on-3 situations or 3-on-2 situations on the back end. And we wanted our guys to be able to navigate those situations and be able to get us back to set, which was back to 5-on-5. So when the ball screen happens here, we've got these 2 guys who are committed to stopping the ball, which means our hoop guy and our 2 zone guys need to figure out how to guard these 4 guys for a split second, which they do it. And now right here, we went from being at a disadvantage to being back to 5-on-5 where everybody's guarding their guy and everybody's in like the defensive position that we want them to be in. And to me, like that's the sign of a good team is when you go from scrambled back to set. And I would tell our guys, like, if we can do that 2 times in one possession, that's a good defensive team. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So now we're going to take a look at a couple of bad possessions and we'll explain why. Okay. So on this one, we would tell our 5s, if you felt like this ball screen happens outside of an operating area and this kid isn't really a threat to do anything out there, that they don't have to hedge it and they can tell our guard to run under it. And this is exactly what our kid does here. He just says, like, I'm not going out there. You can run under this one and we're fine. So to me, that was a good decision. And now as they get to the second ball screen, like now this kid's in an operating area. So our 5 needs to be up and like on this guy's hip and he needs to be out ready to hedge this ball screen and he's not. So like this is too much space for our 5-man to give him. And when this ball screen defense tends to break down, it usually starts because your 5 isn't engaged enough. And if guys can pass easily out of this ball screen D, you end up being in a lot of trouble because we're zoned up down here. Like our hoop guy's down here and it's a 18-foot closeout to get to the corner. So if this guy can just come off a ball screen and pick you apart, you're going to be in closeouts all day. So our 5 doesn't get out and hedge it well enough. This ball handler has way too much space. Our hoop guy gets hung up being at the hoop, and this kid makes a direct pass here, and then that's what happens when your 5 isn't aggressive enough. It's too long of a closeout. They get a rhythm 3. This is the same thing here. All right, so they come down and they're just playing ball screen offense right away. Like our big is in perfect position here. He's got his hand on his hip. So this one, he can get out and redirect this thing and should redirect it to half court. All right, we've got our lowest guy on the heavy side, who's this guy right here, is going to get to the hoop, which he does. So he's in perfect position. He's at the hoop. We've got a zone guy who only has one man in his zone, so he's basically just guarding this kid. And then we have our other zone guy over here who's splitting these two guys. But because our 5-man doesn't get out and hedge this screen, he just kind of flat, soft hedges it, and this kid's got all this space. He comes off, rifles a pass to their big, and they get a point-blank layup. All right, the other thing I mentioned that where I don't think this ball screen defense is very good is unsettled situations or transition. All right, and here this team comes down. They get a ball screen like right off the bat in transition. And what happens is like our guys are still identifying like who they have. So like as this ball screen gets set, like this kid should be our hoop guy, but he's still identifying his man. Our 5-man should be out attached to their big, but he ran back to the rim because it's transition defense, and now he's getting back to his guy. So what ends up happening is there's way too big of a pocket here for this kid to make this pocket pass. And then instead of being right here, like at the front of the rim, our hoop guy is on the block, and he's 2 or 3 steps too far away. So he's too late. So they throw this pocket pass. He slides in, and instead of a charge, it's an ammo.
Yep.
So this would be a scenario where, like, if you were to just kind of low hedge ball screens, or you were to switch them, like you'd be fine. But because we need all 5 of our guys kind of engaged and in the right spots when it's unsettled like this, we struggle with these ball screens. The other area that, you know, when it's not the big, it's usually our hoop guy. And what happens is he's just a second late, or he's not in the spot that he needs to get to. And then he becomes rather useless. Yep. All right. So you'll see it here. Like this kid knows, like the ball screen's happening, and our guy knows I'm at the hoop, and he thinks he's doing the right thing. He's like engaged. He knows the ball screen's happening. He knows he's the hoop guy. The mistake he makes is he's on the block instead of being right in front of the rim. And this kid gets a pocket pass, and he slides over, and now this kid finds himself in the charge circle in a 5-man with a full head of steam coming right at his chest, and there's nothing he can do about it. You know, so if our kid had just taken, you know, 1 step over, he's going to meet this kid, you know, out here, and he's going to be there for a steal, or it's going to be a charge. You know, and then the other thing you'll see here, which happens a lot, is, again, all of the space that this ball handler has. So he can come off and he's in a rhythm, and he just fires a little pocket pass with no pressure from our guard or our big. So like if we were to break this down in film, we'd address, but you know, all 3 of those guys: our hoop guy, our big not pressuring the passer, and the guy guarding the ball handler not making it a harder pass.
Yeah. One of the terms I heard on that I think we'll try to incorporate that's good is for the guy in the ball, connect and direct.
Yeah.
Connect and direct them. But I think when going back and evaluating our ball screen D this year, that's probably one of the biggest areas of weakness, is really pressing up and bullying the ball.
Yep.
And it's something, especially if you're looking as a coach at the rotations and the hoop guy.
Yep.
We're so worried about getting that guy to the hoop that we're not as relentless on the guy pressuring the ball.
No, there's no doubt. That was like, that's where my eyes always went to during the game, was as that ball screen was happening, I wanted to make sure we had hoop coverage. And so I would take my eyes off the guys that were impacting the ball. And for our bigs, the other thing we tried to get them to do a little bit more is be active with your hands. Not only is like trying to deflect passes, but actually trying to reach in and steal the ball if you can. Because I mean, you and I both know the way that we like to play, like we're not generating a lot of steals. So just finding different ways that we can kind of reach in and get deflections, get steals, I think is really good. And that's the areas that next year, I think that once we have our base in, which we now have in, we can start to work on those details.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to show you one more. And this hurt us a lot too. And is when teams slip ball screens. All right. So here we tell our big on a slip, if they slip it really early and you don't feel like that ball screen is real, then just stay with the big. If you feel like you've already committed to the ball screen, then commit to the ball screen, try to make the pass harder. But here this team runs really good offense. He slips it with perfect timing, and they hit the big on a slip. Our hoop guy is there. He did a good job. Like, he was totally engaged. He knew he was the hoop guy. He absorbs the slip. So he did his job. And like where we need to get better next year is, can we go from this disadvantaged situation back to set? And like, this is something that we just didn't get to work on this layer enough in practice, you know, where our guys knew when this happened that our kid right here was ready to fire off to 32 and he can be there on the catch. And then if 32 passes it to this kid in the corner, our hoop guy is already on his way out to close out on this kid in the corner. All right. And just making the offense go to one more additional layer and making uncontested shots be contested. And here we weren't ready for it. You know, like we got to that first layer of defense, which we absorbed the slip. That's great. But now can we rotate out of it and get back to set? And we weren't far enough along yet.
What will you do next year to drill that? What have you figured out something that is the best way to drill that?
Yeah, I think that like the more I watch this stuff, like there's only so many scenarios that you get put into, right, with this stuff. And we will drill like that exact scenario. Like it will go from shell to 5-on-5, and we'll say, okay, this is what's going to happen. They're going to slip the screen, they're going to hit the big, and they're going to kick out. And here's how I want you guys rotating out of this. And, you know, similar to how we've always done it at Bucknell and Mason, like we didn't get too into the weeds with how to rotate or how to scramble. Like there's no like set way to do it. It's like the closest guy go, like somebody's got to make a decision, and then the decisions will kind of domino from there. And I like coaching it that way, but we didn't put our kids in that scenario.
Enough of those scenarios. Right. Yeah. Right. It's always that fine line when you do that, because you have to go at less than game speed to get the offense to dictate, here's what you're going to do. You're going to slip, you're going to hit the big's going to kick it out. And you have to do it not at full speed, but then it has to be full intensity, you know, and that's, and that that's the age old secret in coaching is put guys in enough scenarios, but make it competitive enough that.
Yeah. And I I think that like walking through the pattern helps the kids be like, all right, we're going to walk through it and show you how to do it. And now we're going live, you know, but I think that they do need that like muscle memory to be able to have practiced it and seen it, to be able to do it effectively in a game, so that eventually they're not necessarily even thinking about it. They're just rotating, you know, and doing it the right way. But we had a hard time making decisions. We'd have two guys, and either one of them could have been the one to rotate, and they would both freeze, you know. Right. And I just tell them, like, somebody just go, you know, or both of you go. Like, if you call it at the same time, you both go. But like, somebody's got to make that first decision to go do something, and then everybody else can react from there.
It's amazing how much leadership, somebody who plays with confidence on the defensive end. Everyone talks about the player who plays with confidence on the offensive end, but the player who plays with confidence on the defensive end is really empowering to the rest of his teammates as well.
Yeah. And the other thing that I'll say is, like, we had we practiced really well. Like our kids were awesome at practice. And when we would do shell or we would be 5-on-5 in the half court, our kids would talk like crazy. Like they would be nonstop, like, I'm hoop, you're zone, I'm rotating. And then when we got to the game, they didn't talk as much. So like that's one of the challenges for me is to figure out how we can take that talk from practice and translate it to a game. And I don't know why that is, but that I definitely noticed that this year.
I would guess, one, that's the age-old problem for every coach who's watching this and ever coached a team. And it's not one that you ever have solved. But I do think it will get better as they're in another year in the system.
Yeah.
And then nothing succeeds like success. So when they, as you get a little better depth, as you get, just guys that really know what you want and you have some success, then that will empower them to talk more. It's like the person who walks into a room where they don't know anyone. Yep. 1 in a million is outgoing and talks to everyone, but most of us, when you feel insecure, you close up a little bit, and that's the challenge.
Yeah.
For sure. What do you guys do in what we would call smash action? If somebody went to screen for the 5 to get him there dislodged, would you still try to hard hedge, or what would you do?
No, like we tell our big, like if for whatever reason you become detached, you can't get out there, then it turns into just a softer hedge where you're just trying to contain the ball handler. Because I didn't want guys jumping out too late, trying to make up for ground, because that's when our kids, they'd foul or they'd end up getting split on a ball screen. So if you're late to it, it's not good, but just own it and soft hedge it.
Would that be where that's where you're also vulnerable now to that guy picking you apart, because it's not as aggressive. Yeah. And that hoop guy, that's where your hoop guy gets put on an island.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
And the thing that I'll do next year that I wanted to do it this year, and for whatever reason I did it, when teams started to scheme for our hard hedges, I want to switch ball screens, like just for a couple of possessions. And I don't care about the mismatches. I don't care if it's a huge 5 on a small 1. I just want to switch ball screens for 2 or 3 possessions so that they get taken out of their scheme, and then we'll go back to our black. And what I did this year, instead of doing that, is I put in a bad zone, and it ended up like we ended up winning a game because of it. The first game we showed zone, like we went to it late, and the team didn't react well to it, and we ended up winning a 1-possession game. But then as the year went on, I started playing it a little bit more when our man wasn't going well and the zone sucked. So it inevitably, like, it was bad for our program because it made our zone wasn't good. I think it made our man like a little softer. So I'd rather just switch ball screens for a possession or 2 and then go back to our base. And that's what I think I'll do next year.
Okay. How did you find, so most of those film clips, again, I think a lot of times Division III takes stuff from Division I, and Division I takes stuff from the NBA. So most of those film clips were traditional side or spread ball screens, where the ball screen was 2-3 steps closer to the sideline than the lane line extended.
Yep.
Okay. And so when we went to that 2 years ago, your last year on staff, what teams started to do is really put those spread ball screens more in the middle of the floor, more heavy and load.
Yep.
Did you run into that much?
No. And we will. Like, I think you're right. Like, the trends take a couple of years. Like, we saw mostly what I showed you, like the more traditional ball screens. But when we do see them, like what I tell our big is, like, you need to impact the ball like as much of a threat as this kid is. So, like, if the ball handler is going more towards the sideline and there's not as much room for him to go create offense and make a play, then you don't have to impact it as much as if he's like trying to come downhill and get to the rim on you. All right. So it becomes a read. And as soon as the ball handler as a threat goes away, then your hedge goes away and you're back to guarding your guys. And that's where we give them a little bit of a little bit of freedom and like not try to make it so rigid, and then not have to change ball screen defenses, right? So it's like, oh, this is our hard hedge, this is our flat hedge, this is our angled hedge. It's just like, no, we're hedging. And whatever that means, it varies by situation.
Yeah. This off season, we'll just turn gears a little bit for a couple more minutes.
Yep.
So during this pandemic, what are the one or two things that you've seen, whether it be a Zoom or a clinic or talking with coaches, or what are the one or two things you've seen or heard that you're like, wow, I really like that. Like, that's a new concept that you and I haven't talked about. This is what we would be normally doing anyway. What's out there that you've liked?
I don't know if there's anything that's been new that has caught my eye, but I do think what I've rediscovered is like the value of simplicity. And especially in like today's day and age where like there's so much stuff that you can do. All you need to do is go on Twitter and everybody's got a new play. Everybody has a new scheme. And what I've learned, and I know I will apply to next season, is we are going to be simple. Like offensively, we're going to be simple. Like we're not going to have a lot of stuff. And defensively, it's going to be the same. Like it's going to be what you saw. We're going to get better at it.
So for 12 years, you kept saying, we're going to do more stuff. We're going to change up. Now you're a head coach, and now you're right where I was.
100%.
Isn't that funny?
It's amazing. It's amazing. But I do think it takes like that head coaching experience to realize, like, because you're in the thick of it all the time, and you're the one that has to make the decision. So you really need to do like critical thinking, that as an assistant, you can make a suggestion and not maybe have to have like thought it through all that much.
Yeah.
But like I look at the national championship game with Virginia and Texas Tech, and I'm like, those two teams are really well coached and they have really good players and they play completely different styles of basketball.
Couldn't
Like,
be more
they
dissimilar.
couldn't be-
Defense. Two of the
they
best defensive coaches out there.
But they couldn't be any different. So
Yeah.
like, it just reassures me, like, unless you're an idiot and doing stuff that just like makes no sense, like schematically, as long as your stuff is sound, just do it and like practice it and do it well. And whether you hard hedge ball screens or ice them or soft hedge them, they're all good and they all have flaws to them, but just work on it. And I think if you do that, ultimately you'll produce like the best team that you can produce.
Absolutely. Well, listen, AK, this was great. Appreciate your time as always. Always good to reconnect. And so much fun to watch you work the sidelines at Catholic and try to keep your own kids under control, which is a lot harder.
Doing this, and I appreciate doing it with everybody else as well. I think it's a great cause and it was a great idea. So keep it up.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, AK.
Okay. Thanks, Coach.